Right. I am thinking, trusting that we are now live.
Yeah, yeah. I see it.
Welcome, Hakim. Welcome, welcome, teacher. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for agreeing to come and having spirit-led conversation.
Glad to be here. It's been a
And
while. It's been a while.
yes, it's been over a year.
Yes,
Yeah, it was what? October, November, a year and a month, something like that.
Dartington Hall,
Yes, that it was.
where
That
we,
auspicious weekend at Dartington Hall,
I think it was called Sensing,
Dartington Estate.
yes, Sensing the Planet, and I think it was, there are a few, Paul Gilroy, Alexis Pauline Gums, and we shared time and space together. I remember. Exchanged words and wrote poetry
Yes.
under a tree. Yes. So, yes,
Yes,
yeah,
and
I'm blessed
shared
to be
sacred space.
here. And I'm blessed to be here.
Yeah, man. Yes, thank you, as am I. So, where will it flow? Where will we flow?
Uh, okay.
Has anything been coming up for you?
I think in the starting there was, and we don't have to start here. I'm gonna say a thing. Might read a short piece, and in reading that short piece, I think it's uh, I run contemplative spaces for Black men and men of color, and I'm thinking I could read a short piece, and then we could see where that takes us. And it's a very short piece, but
Yes,
I
please.
have to read it, and it speaks to Bantaba. And yeah, I read it once before, and I'm going to read it again because I think it's a good starting place. So
Thank you.
indulge me here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Bantaba, from the Mandinka, which means meeting place. I came to know this word living in the Gambia. We lived there for 11 years, raised 5 children, played a sound system, taught in schools, ran out of school projects, and eventually opened a school and children's center, which is still in operation. Most compounds, villages, and communities have a bantaba, a meeting space, which could be a structure designed and built for the purpose, but could equally take natural form in a cool spot under a mango tree. I wanted to make a bantaba, a meeting place for Black men. This has now been running for about a year. I have written a piece that I hope gives you a flavor of this work, including some of the context surrounding it and informing the ways that we share and practice together. Names have been changed. To the word Bantaba, I have added an extra a signal and a reminder of the centrality of breathing and breath work to any contemplative practice. Bantaba. Marcus, perceived as a bad boy, age 9. One day in school, he looks out of sorts. So I ask if he'd like to talk about it. He declines. I offer plain and lined paper, giving him the option to draw or write. He decides to write. I have spent many years working in schools. I have encountered many Marcuses, so-called bad boys on their journeys to being men. Marcus, sit down and pay attention, comes the scream of his teacher. Marcus is struggling to focus on the current topic, Beowulf and the Anglo-Saxon era. Beowulf, archetypal hero, dragon slayer, king, bad man, we might say, but Marcus, whose gaze is too slow to turn back to Teachah, is not a hero, but a trouble that the teacher is now threatening to send out of class. Teachers talk about not letting children get away with things, about zero tolerance, about stamping out and cracking down. The behavior policy is tough. Implicitly, we come to understand that what boys need, and Black boys in particular, is tough. Something I've learned working with Black boys in so many different times and spaces is the value of tender. I create spaces that allow me and others to be more tender. Tender, adjective, soft, easily injured, kind, affectionate, loving. Tender, verb, to offer formally, to hold forth, to stretch. Tender, noun, person who tends another, a small boat used to attend larger ones. Attend, verb, to be present. The word masculinity is not as clear as steer as we'd like, as we would perhaps like it to be. We are bombarded with numerous philosophies of what is and is not to be man. What exactly is manhood, masculinity, maleness? What is its relationship to vulnerability? Can it include permission to turn inwards, to turn toward each other? I know what it is to be a boy or a man trying to find themselves in a world full of distractions, full of thoughts and chaotic feelings. I know what it is to have others misconceive and fail to recognize me and try to shoehorn me into the shape of what they think black boy, black men should be. I got tired of trying to guess which environment group would be accepting of my more tender moments and parts. I grew tired of the continual hide and seek of my emotions and frustrations. Marcus is frustrated, maybe also tired when he eventually finds me. He hands me the paper and stands back while I read. It says, yesterday I was told off because I was sleeping in assembly, because I was stressed and had a headache. People came saying I'm a rude boy and I should just leave the school. Who they see as a rude boy is a stressed boy, a tired boy, a boy with a headache. Marcus writes, sorry if I misbehave, but I have too many thoughts and emotions and feelings to control. I lose my mind, can't focus, and get distracted all the time. Marcus cries. Bantaba is a space to listen to what an anti-black world refuses to hear or know, to listen to the quiet of ourselves. As Kevin Quashie might describe this, a quiet that is the expression of our interior, a quality of looking inward, beyond the public face of stereotype and limited imagination. The inner reservoir of thoughts, feelings, desires, fears, ambitions that shape us as humans. Marcus says it's annoying, and I can't speak out because I just freeze up and say it's nothing. I thought that year 5 was a new start. Bantaba is a space where we invite ourselves to suspend judgment, where we acknowledge our experiences and feelings, stay close to ourselves, meet the parts of ourselves that just freeze up and say it's nothing, and speak the unspeakable, where we laugh and breathe, listen to music and breathe, where we be more tender and breathe, and sit in a sanctuary from the oceans of anti-blackness, feeling what Christina Sharp calls the wake, the afterlives of slavery, the past which is not past. Marcus says, I'm trying to behave, but I got people saying I'm a rude boy. I just hope everything gets better. I don't want to be excluded. To feel excluded rather than cared for. Marcus knows this. I know this. Many of us know this. What if? What if we can come together and bring all the parts that this system wants to send into exclusion? The bad boy, the tender, the fearful, the desiring, the imaginative, and create the world in which it is possible to be black and human, be more than all of the categories that have been created to enclose and control and exclude and deny us. Bantaba. Bantaba is a what if space, a contemplative space, a belly laugh space, a tender and creative space, a space in which we get to define and make ourselves, to breathe and live otherwise.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. And thank Marcus, and thank the Marcuses in all of us,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the men and the Marcuses, the men, that aspect of masculinity within all of us. whether we're male or female body, because I can certainly identify with most, if not all, of Marcus there. Yeah.
And I see,
And as I
sorry,
listened, no, you go.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
As I listened, it reminded me of I have to say, a message that came through me. This was 2020, so almost 3 years ago now, which spoke to a group of mostly women. There was one man in the group, and what came through was literally like all my grandmothers coming in and coming through me, saying, women, please make note that it is also a part of the role of the divine feminine to support, to look after, to help, to nurture, and to heal the divine masculine, which has been overworked, abused, misperceived. And therefore, all this talk about feminine power, understand that a part of that power and some of the responsibility that comes with that power is to attend to the divine masculine. And every time I hear that and I hear myself utter that, I feel the depths of the wounds that speaks into, you know, within both aspects, um, and what it stirs up within the feminine, especially definitely within me, you know, the black female, which, yeah, is to be strong, is to be independent, is to can do everything on their own. And yeah, but it's even that is coming from a place of wounding, a place of imbalance. And therefore, when I hear myself saying to women, we have to look after our men, we have to attend to our men. And I often speak back to the man within me as a woman, you know, as well as my sons and the men in my life, to allow ourselves to be tender. That's not something that even as women we have been allowed to be. As black women, as that's all I can speak to. So yeah,
It is interesting that you're speaking on being tender. And earlier on this year, it was my mantra for the start of the year. Rather than have New Year resolutions, I said my mantra is to be more tender. And by being more tender, it's a practice. Because if you say practice, then you are allowed to fail. So my practice is to be more tender. And so in my everyday life, working with young people, is to be more tender, particularly around everybody I encounter. But I suppose I work particularly around black boys. They need to see, and tender doesn't need to be weak. Tender just means I'm being tender, and I'm going to be more tender with myself first, so I can then be more tender with the other. And I think I've seen that in schools, that there is a general lack of tenderness in school, and young people struggle with that. Schools can be quite oppressive, and I think when I was working in secondary school with older children, I saw they were already struggling with themselves to be tender. And then I realized if I go to primary, then perhaps we can do some work there. So I'm engaged in a practice of self to be more tender, but also modeling to others what it is to be tender, and particularly in large institutions that often people ask me, what do you teach? And I say, and they often, I know the response they want is to say, I teach a subject, but I don't. My response is, I teach young people to navigate themselves, to navigate other people, and to navigate the large institutions that we put them in. And I think in doing that, you need to be, a practice of tenderness needs to be there.
Absolutely. And like you say, that practice of tenderness, in order for it to be authentic, in my eyes, in my opinion, in my experience, it has to be practiced within, which, like you say, you practice first to be tender with yourself. I have often said to people, love up yourself. And
Mm.
the response has often been, I don't even know if I know how to do that.
Mm.
You know? And when I hear that, I remember when it first really registered, and I had to go into myself to look at what is it that I do to love up myself? How do I love up myself? You know? Um, and I found that it starts with a slowing down and paying attention to my inner dialogue. When I get out of kilter, how do I feel when I don't get something right? Do I beat up myself like I felt I was beaten up as a child? And I don't mean physically beaten up. Just for when my mother or father hear this, No, it's not that. It's about feeling like a failure because I didn't do this right or do that right and being scolded for it somehow, you know? Um, and in doing so, becoming aware and actually remembering just how little time, we spend reflecting on ourselves in that way. It's easy to look outside and say, well, yeah, but if you just do this and you just do that, you can't, this will go. But what about in here? So I have a question. um, how do you, and it is very complex from my experience of this. It's quite complex. What the dialogue look like, what the process look like for you, the process of being tender with yourself. Take your
Mm.
time, ain't no rush.
Yeah,
I just me, you, and
I'm
God
allowing.
there.
I'm going to allow your words to land, and because it relates to something that you said about being tender with yourself, and it's your interior. How often we live in a world full of distractions, so we don't really focus on ourselves. If we do focus on ourselves, it's a tendency. I'm talking. I'm going to stay close to myself and think about what my own experiences. That it's, we're consuming. We're consuming things. We're consuming social media. We're consuming it. So how often do we find moments where we sit? I mentioned in the piece I read out earlier on, we sit in quiet, and you said it so beautifully. Do we sit and listen, deep listen to ourselves? Listen to our thoughts, just what's there. And I know sometimes I find it can be uncomfortable to listen to what we are saying, particularly if you've got, like me, you've got a harsh inner critic that you do a thing and the inner critic come out and beat you, and it's just saying you're not enough, you're not good enough, and to listen to that, but to really, and that's why I said my mantra was to be more tender, because how do I sit with that inner critic and that inner parent that comes out from time to time, and He's beating me up, and I think, how do I do it? I said it's a practice, and I could give an example, and I always will relate it to children, particularly boy children, because they eventually become men. We hope, well, not we hope, but that's the journey, the trajectory they might travel. And there was an incident in school of a young boy who wrote in his book, and he did some work, and he scribbled all over his book after he did the work. And my initial, this is where I was more tender with myself on this young boy. My initial teacher response was, yeah, you got to stay in. No, 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 you can't do that to your book. You got to stay in. But something said, no, 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 there is something else. Let me listen to him. Let me be more tender with myself and be more tender with this young boy. And I eventually called him over and I said, please tell me, why did you scribble in your book? And he said, I was angry. And I said, why were you angry? So I'm curious, and I think I want to be curious. I want to explore. He said, because I went to bed late, and my journey to school, we were arguing a lot with my parents. And I thought, in the end, I just said to him, thank you very much. And I let it go. Because at that moment, he needed someone who was going to be tender for him. But I had to practice that with myself first. I also had to practice to listen deeply to myself. And I heard that teacher voice come out and said, no, punish him, because schools are punitive. But if I didn't turn inwards and listen to myself, I would have responded in the same way and just kept him in, shouted them. Well, I don't shout in school anyway, but raise my voice or whatever, like what teachers generally do, and not really got to the core of what was troubling him. That's why I often say that schools they can be anxiety inducing, large institutions generally can be anxiety inducing environments for children, but adults too. So I think, to answer your question about what is the practice, I'm reminded of, when you're on a plane and they give you the safety talk and they drop down that oxygen mask and they say, even if you have children, what do they say? Put that mask on yourself first. Because if you're not
First.
helping yourself first, and I don't mean in a selfish way, you're not in a selfish way, because sometimes when people talk about self-care, they think it's not a selfish thing, because I mean it in a collective way, that I'm putting this on so I can help the others. So yeah, you have to, and I think my practice is to plan moments of quiet in my day where I can really listen to myself. Even if I'm at work at lunchtime, I'll take 5-10 minutes to sit in the quiet and say, yeah, what do I need right now? What's going on for me right now? What emotions are present right now? And there's an activity I do it. I call it noticing out loud, and I speak them out loud. So I want to know. Okay, at the moment I'm anxious, so I take ownership of it. Somebody walks into the room and says, "What's wrong with Mr. Taylor?" I said, "No, at the moment I'm anxious. Let me own it." And I think that's my practice of being tender, to name what's going on for me in that present moment. Because I think sometimes, I see it in schools, young people are not given that freedom to express themselves and be curious and speak to their tender parts. They're not given that space.
Absolutely. And we often feel like it's not acceptable, it's not done to take space, much less to be tender with self. This need for do, that need for do, go wash up the dishes. And I'm speaking of parent, child,
Yeah, yeah.
because, yeah, like you said, boys to men, girls to women.
Mm-hmm.
The little girls in my work, I see a lot of, inner child stuff. And I say inner child, quote unquote, because we're right here alongside each other, the child and the adult, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so much of it colors everything in life. So much of our ability, the permission we give ourselves, the permissions we feel we can give ourselves or don't even know that we can give ourselves. Um, to be kind, to be loving, to be gentle with ourselves, because a lot of us don't know what that feel like or look like, because a lot of our loving look tough and feel tough, to the point where, and I speak of this from personal experience, to the point where having, there have been times in the past when having somebody love upon me, be affectionate towards me, has been uncomfortable. It's like I feel repulsed by it. And not necessarily because I didn't like the person. Yes, the instance that comes to mind, I felt very strongly for this person. But all this love and affection that was being doled upon me, it was too much. I said to him, I feel like you're stifling me. And you know, and it was years after that I realized that I struggled to receive affection. Years after, and relationships after, you know, and this is something that I've seen, I've witnessed, you know, yes, in men as well. This inability to receive affection without feeling pressured, you know, by receiving this affection. Does that make sense?
Yes, it is in a way. I'm tricky because I like what you're talking about experience, but it's also that sometimes I think we are, particularly as men and women, we are conditioned into that way of thinking. And I often, when people talk about masculine and manhood, and I think, I often, every group, every organization has its space, has its moment. And I often think, whose definition of man are we following? When we say, I'm a man, I'm the breadwinner, I can do this, and I'm going to be tough and pull your socks out. I said, whose definition of man? Because if you think, or I think that the tentacles of empire reach far. So, and we are all,
Wide and deep.
yes, deep is the word, and we're all afflicted by it. So sometimes when we're
Yeah.
talking about I'm a man, I suppose I've learned in my contemplative space is to always be curious. And I always ask, well, what is man then? Whose man are you following? Which definition of man? And is there any, you know, growing up, you weren't allowed to be tender. But I think it's an important part of us. Our development as men is to be tender. And not in a, as I said, some people say, oh, well, you're weak, man. No, what do you mean? I said, no,
Mm-hmm.
being tender is necessary for survival. Yes, don't get me wrong. I can't remember who said the quote, but it's about being able, both realities can exist at the same time. Being able to clutch a flower or admire a flower, but also being able to clench your fist at the same time. So it's about balance. So my focus, because I realized that there was a part of me that was just harsh with, quick to judge, quick to, cut people off. And I just said, no, 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 no. Let me be more tender. Because what I realized, I need to practice being compassionate with myself. In a world that is anti-black, is a world that is harsh. No matter how you move through it, that we are seemingly judged. And I think I wrote a quote, and it's by Dion Brand. I just want to just indulge me. Let me read out this quote. And Dion Brand writes,
Mm-hmm.
One enters a room and history follows. One enters a room and history proceeds. History is already seated on the chair in the empty room when one arrives. Where one stands in society seems always related to this historical experience. And I often equate that to the schools I walk into, the classrooms I walk into. And then I think of it, of these young, I'm gonna, it relates to everyone really, but I'm speaking of black boys, black boys in particular.
Mm-hmm.
That when they
Mm-hmm.
walk into that classroom, even if there's an empty chair in there, they're already judged already. And then if you put somebody else in that chair, they come with their own personal history, their own judgments. And I think, oh, that's why I suppose I'm so, what can I say? My passion is to teach young people, how do you navigate such institutions? Because as a teacher, they forget that young people have to navigate not only the institution, but the emotions of the adults who are in those institutions. Because we often think it's just the child, but I think there are some wicked teachers out there who are not in check of themselves, who are not tender to themselves and not tender to other people. So I'm thinking, how does a child navigate that? What skills and strategies do they need to navigate the other person who is in a position of power? And I think schools tend to call those skills, I suppose, soft skills. There you go. That's the patriarchy there. Call it soft skills, and there's a focus on maths and English, but not the skills which I think young people need to navigate those large institutions and the world.
Yeah, and life, the soft skills, the feminine, the divine, the characteristics of the divine feminine, which you said something earlier and it really reminded me of how I perceive. So, this strongman thing, man a wall, man on a wallpaper.
Mm,
Um, if a building, a tall building, a skyscraper, then big, powerful, imposing, you know, it has to have good suspension. It have to have some kind of mechanism to allow it movement
mm-hmm.
within it in order for it to withstand the natural subtle shiftings of the earth, I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I perceive that those mechanisms that allow it to move without breaking, falling apart, I perceive that as the feminine, you know, the softness which has to be allowed to flow through the masculine so that it can stay strong, so that it can keep standing, in order to hunt and provide and do the things that need to be done to support the feminine.
Mm,
It's a dance, you know, and as you spoke about, you know, how young people navigate, your passion for helping young people to navigate or providing a space of support for them. Having a container like you is so vital. It's like, well, as you said it, and I heard that, and I saw you as this container. I thought, gosh, every school need at least 10 containers, at least, depending on the size of the school. Because often not only are they navigating in this space where these adults playing the roles of teacher
mm,
have their own stuff,
mm,
but at home, mommy and daddy, or mommy or daddy, you know, dealing with their own stuff, or rather, mostly not dealing with their own stuff, inner stuff. So, cycles being repeated and cycles being repeated um, with children who have come in here even more sensitive than we came in, you know, even more full and bright and sensitive, meaning they feel so much, they know so much, they come in here with so much wisdom, so much healing to give, to give and to share with the world, but not knowing what to do, how to even identify this. But there's something weird and special about me, but mommy or daddy don't understand because mommy or daddy caught up, you know,
mm,
and still in the pattern of this is how you're supposed to behave. You know, you're supposed to be seen and not heard. Stop your crying, yeah, boy, picnic. Stop crying like a little girl. Yada, yada, yada. So their faculties being shut down when they're artists and priests and healers and, you know, architects, creatives. But being attacked and without understanding of why they're being attacked, and therefore this shutting down occurs, and the projections start when them go to school, when them playing with them like a sister or brother, when them, you know, and it's violence because even if our parenting is not violent, it can feel that
mm,
that shutting down can feel violent to sensitive souls. So, you know, yes, I'm speaking to all the adults in the room. At whatever point you come into the room, seek to be more tender with yourself, and therefore and also to remember what it was like for you as a child. It never ceases to amaze me that most people seem to forget what it was like
mm,
for them to be a child or a teenager. You know, you never want your parents telling you nothing. You feel like you know everything.
mm,
And any big man or big woman me listen to as somebody who could meet me or allow me to feel like they saw me as an equal, you know, and then I would share everything. I could be open. So come on, let's start to provide a safe container for our children and young people so that the patterns can start to change. And I'm speaking to all who listening, the one or two who may listen in. You know, it's a big deal. So thank your teacher for, you know, for doing what you do. Cause one cocoa full basket, as them say, every mickle make a muckle.
every
Every
mickle,
little helps.
yeah. There is that. I was listening to you talk. There is a Alexis Pauline Gumbs. You said about schools being containers, and I'm reading into that about care. And she was saying this thing about schools being places of being judged on a scale of care. Whereas at the moment, Ofsted come in and they look at your books and say, yeah. But supposing we were to flip it and it was to be judged, schools were to be judged on a scale of care where people could care for each other and move together. Because at the moment, schools, and you know, as you said, people in this Zoom or this YouTube may say that schools can be, by their very nature, oppressive places for staff and for young people. But if you flip it and it was one of care, where the primary focus, the underlying philosophy was care for self and the other, then surely, and I mean, in that, when I say care for self and the other, I'm incorporating the use of breath work in that. Surely then the young people leaving school going out and to be so-called good citizens, when they engage in, when they start relating with the other, it's more positive. And that's what I see, because we have, I'm always amazed that I work in schools and you have people who, and I put myself in this, people are not managing their emotions. So what do we put in place to help? adults manage their emotions when they go into these places. And I just think more care is needed, more therapeutics. And therapeutics, I'm not talking about where you go into a room and just sit down with the one person, because we've been conditioned to thinking that therapy is that forum where you just sit down and it's just you and the therapist. But therapeutics could be poetry, it could be music, it could be farming, it could be anything, it could be art. But more places and spaces where we can work, live, and move therapeutically, rather when, and I'm speaking of schools here because I'm in school, where you are indoctrinated to believe one thing and think this way and it's this values. And you mentioned something, and at the moment it's a topic that's in my mind, and it's deep listening. In order to achieve some of that, we have to, just say we have to. One thing I've found beneficial is deep listening. To listen, to really listen to myself, to listen to the other. And by listening to the other, I mean not necessarily to respond, not necessarily to rescue, but just to listen. Because I think so the other person can have their words witnessed. There is a beauty in that. You don't have to respond. You can just sit. And it's deep listening is active. It's not passive. Often we think it's a passive thing. But to really tune in to another person and resist all the judgment that you want, because don't get me wrong, I'm in it. Somebody's talking, but no, the word is coming. No, I can't wait, man. I can't tell you. But no, to sit and just hold on a minute. Let me just really hear this person. I'm going to say listen, not hear. Because you can hear a thing, but it doesn't mean you listen to the thing. And particularly the practice of deep listening, where we live in a world that has so much noise. So much noise. It's really, sometimes I think, well, I'm just drowning in this noise. How often, or what are our practices of deep listening? When do we really sit? And I read, and it's true, this thing called entrainment, that if you sit with somebody for long enough, more than 15 to 20 minutes, you sink. Your heartbeats will sink. They say you will do it if you're walking on the road with somebody and your footsteps will sink. How often do we get the time to just really focus and do that? To sit and listen to the other. And we just listen to the other and listen to our own thoughts without judgment, and suspend judgment, hold that, and, because you catch yourself, why I'm thinking in the past, or why I'm thinking in the future, but without judgment, to say, okay, that thought is there, it's going to pass. Yeah, it's that kind of, that listening on that level, listening to understand the other person without formulating the idea whilst the person's talking. You're just really giving that person your full attention. You're attending, as I said in the piece. You are attending, which is a verb, a doing.
Yeah. Holding space. Yeah, just being a container. And I find that you say, how often do we get to? But in my experience, most choose not to. Most seem to be too afraid of that silence, the darkness of silence, of quietude. It's as if once two people in a space, you feel you have to talk, or they feel they have to talk, or have to say something. No, it's okay. Even if you have to express, or even if you have to speak it, is it okay? Please don't mind if I'm quiet. I just being with me. I'm good. I just being with me. You can talk if you want, but yeah. But to choose it, I find many would rather not. It's like they just want to fill the void with some kind of noise. If it's not a phone, is words, conversation. it is such a rare treat for me to sit in space and just not need to speak, you know? And for the other people or the other person to be able to be comfortable in their silence, in that silence, to allow the stirrings to come up within, and to attend to those alone, and then maybe share with some insight. And I suppose I'm speaking now of more intimate relationship,
Mm.
you know? Because, yeah, it's like, and this is just a scenario that comes to mind, two people, one got to work all day, come in, whether the other one was also at work, come in, everybody meet in the same place, everybody each had their day. One getting annoyed because the other one seemed to not be paying attention, or seems the other is annoyed because the other seems irritable and taking it personally and projecting onto each other. So it
Mm.
becomes personal, where, hello, we are two individuals. Each plant need to have space for them own roots, for sink and for grow and for expand. You know,
Mm.
Therefore, it is important to recognize that regardless of the union and the man-made commitments, you have to attend to you. He has to attend to him. She has to attend to her. So take your time with yourself. Take your time with your teacher, your inner teacher. You knew that was
I
coming.
love
I
the way
couldn't
you
make it
talk about
pass.
it. I love the way you talk
You
about
know me that we take time with teacher had to come in.
it.
You know?
But those
So
practices,
yeah.
what you just said there, and I suppose I'm going to highlight why I use those words "tech time." And I'd say in the mindfulness world or the contemplative world, people, I shouldn't say people, it seems like a new thing. But the reason I use the word "tech time" is because that's what my mum used to say to me. So my mum was telling me to slow down. And I'm trying to make a spin on the language our parents used to use with us. Your ear's hard. That means you're not listening, deep listening. So, tech time. I think, oh, yeah, tech time. Slow down. Be patient. So, and in the taking of time, when you are really slowing down, then you can see yourself in those moments of quiet. Because we live in such a world full of distractions and noise, and we get so accustomed to it that even when there is
And
noise,
expectations. Sorry to cut you. And expectations.
yeah, yeah, and we don't, and I think so when there is quiet, it makes us feel uncomfortable, and I include myself in that too. Still, no matter how many years I've been practicing, when you're having a conversation with somebody and it's quiet, you think, I need to fill that space of quietness, but there is so much learning to be done in the quiet. When you've got the noise, how much do we learn when it's quiet? Even like you mentioned, in relationships, it's in the quiet you do the learning. When perhaps you are not talking, when you are in the, when you are in your, okay, when you are in your brokenness, when you're vulnerable, when you think that, and you're taking everything personal, blah, 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 this person not talking to me, hold on a minute. Is that really true? Am I just making judgments here because I'm feeling neglected or whatever it is? But it's in the quiet that you will see yourself. Kevin Quashie mentions that. It's in the quiet you will see the full range of human possibility. You will see your ambitions. You will meet your fears. It brings you to your edge. You will meet yourself. Rasta said I and I. They never said that. They said that for a reason.
Mhm.
So you will meet yourself in the quiet moments. And some of us, we struggle with sitting in that quiet. And I still do. Because, a thought may come up or a memory may come up and you think, but, can we suspend judgment with that? Can we acknowledge that those thoughts are not facts? Can we acknowledge that they too will pass? This soon will pass. Whatever you're in, what's the word I like? Impermanence. Everything changes.
Ah,
Impermanence.
yes, impermanence, yeah.
Everything changes. So it will change.
Totally.
As long as, like you said, we take time. And find ways to incorporate in our lives to have practices of freedom, practices of joy. And by practice of freedom, I mean it could be art, it could be listening, it could be going for a walk. Having that practice of freedom, practice of joy, and making time to be more tender.
Totally. And you spoke of it was something about the quiet moments, the silence. It's something in our brokenness. You
Mm.
spoke of silence as related to our brokenness. Yet as you were speaking, I also thought the quietness also is also there in loving observation of the other or the others. The quietness is also in the passion of lovemaking or sex, even if it is not the lovemaking kind of sex. It is quietude. It is a place where we meet ourselves. So, you know, it is not only in our brokenness. And maybe we can somehow start to reintroduce and reincorporate practices of quietude, solitude with each other together, sitting in baths of silence where just the candles, the flicker of the flames speak, just the breath speaks, just the touch speaks, you know, the water, the steam, the tears, where the allowance of emotions can come up between man and woman, man and man, woman and woman, however it go, you know. Um, but that allowance of tenderness and maybe allowing ourselves to be tender with ourselves in the present, to allow that tenderness to be witnessed, to practice allowing that, because it's going to be it is uncomfortable because many perceive it as weakness. Most men perceive that as weakness. And I mean, I am very thankful. I always feel like I've been blessed to experience men in my life who have been comfortable with their more feminine side, you know, them comfortable with them tears, them comfortable with them strength and them power and them conviction. But when them feel something, yes, tears can flow, you know. That is the man that I am, that I grew up with. Those are the men that I grew up with, you know. So yeah, it saddens me and it touches my heart when I see grown men that are really, so chained by their perception of the masculine, what that is. This false this perception created by those who sought to enslave and enshackle and oppress, and without even recognizing it, they've taken this on without realizing that that's what they've taken on. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I'm just going to read. There's somebody called Iola Williams who is in the chat here. So, being tender to ourselves is often foreign to us, men and women,
Okay.
but it's something I'm learning to do more with wisdom. It's that. That's why I kind of call it a practice. So it's something we practice so we can fail. And it's, so it's no biggie. But it's when you've been conditioned not to really look after self,
Mm-hmm.
really not look after self. When the world can seem quite harsh, to practice being tender, people, this person, they're mad. They're looking at you like you're strange or you're off key. But we need to, and being tender to ourselves could mean just taking a rest when you're feeling under pressure to go work and no, let me just take a rest. And if you remember something that during slavery, those who were enslaved, they had something called petit marinage and grand marinage.
Mm-hmm.
Petit marinage was when they were working on the plantation, and petit marinage, they would go away for a time and rest. And I'm saying they would be more tender with themselves and come back. That was petit marinage. Grand marinade mean they will go and never come back.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to look at being tender.
Lickle, lickle.
Yes, it might be petit marinage or grand marinage where you leave the plantation or the plantocracy completely. And you say, I'm not going back there because
Yeah.
it's not good for myself. Myself.
I and I.
Okay. Did I read this thing out? Or are you going to read?
Hakim, what tools do you teach young people or adults? May have the glasses and before I put them on.
Did I read it?
What tools do you teach young people or adults to interact with people or teachers in positions of power who are not tender with them or you?
I'm sure uh, in teaching they talk about pedagogy and modeling. You have to model, and I suppose as a parent we do it as an uncle or whatever it is. You model what you expect. So I go into, and I'm being honest with you, I go into school and I don't shout at no child because I don't know that child's home life. They could live in a house where there's lots of shouting and screaming, so I don't shout at a child because it could be a trigger for them. But all what I do is I don't punish a child for everything they do in school. I try to let them, people say use your words. I want them to use language. I want them to identify where is this coming from? Where is this place? Where is it coming from? I'm curious. I want to know. And I do it with adults too. There was an incident the other day where I was working with a newly qualified teacher, and her words about everybody were harsh. Harsh, scathing, and mean. And I came on one day and I said to my partner, I said, I need to say something because my initial instance was we had a kind of an interaction and our words were quite violent. And my first thing, let me just cuss this woman and then I'd leave work feel good. I said, no, I can't do that. So I came home and it was a weekend and I sat with it for a little bit and sat with it. And I went back and I had to tell her how her words landed with me. And she was surprised. So nobody's ever told me that. I said, well, I'm going to tell you. This is how I this is how I felt your words. They were violent. So I said, if I'm an adult, imagine those words, that tone you're using with a young child. How, how would it land in a child if I felt it? And I think the strategies, I always talk to people about taking a few breaths before you respond in any situation, because they call it the sacred breath, the first one. That just gives you a bit of time just to say, oh, okay, do I need to respond? How am I going to respond? And I think I just encourage young people, teachers more so, to be reflective. That not everything a child does in school needs to be punished.
Hmm.
They need to be able to speak about it. And I suppose, with the young people I work with over the, it's been a long time now I've been in classrooms, but I think I try to model what I expect. So I try to remain calm, even if they, I have to bite my lip and, say, okay, let me sit down here. That child's done something. What I want to know is, I don't want that child to grow up and continue to repeat that, because if the only way they're going to learn is by force,
Hmm.
is me punishing them. If you learn that way, it's a problem. And it's the same philosophy I have about shouting at young people, because, and I've witnessed this. I've done my own research. If a child lives in a climate where people consistently shout at that child, when you speak softly to that child, they don't move. They just look at you like they're waiting for the threat to come. They think that the only way I should respond is if you shout and scream. And I've seen children's faces when I just sit there and I say, okay, I'm gonna wait for you to calm down. Take a few breaths, just calm down, because I can't talk to you now. And I give them, I suppose, yeah, it's a good question. I give them the science behind it. Because I say, you know what's happening with you now?
Hmm.
Your logical brain is disconnected from your emotional brain. So you can't talk right now. So I can't talk to you right now. So
Mhm.
do what you need to do. You can draw it away, you can write it away, you can sing it away, do what you need to do. And then when you're ready, come back and talk. And then 9 times out of 10, even 10 times, they will come back and say, okay. And I just encourage them, name what's going on for you right now. We live in a world where, particularly as men, we're told to shut down
Mhm.
and not define ourselves, not really turn inwards and say, well, right now, I'm feeling hurt. Or right now, I'm feeling angry. Right now, I'm feeling frustrated. Right now, I'm feeling in shame. Right now, I'm feeling embarrassed. When you name it and you put it out there, it's kind of, oh, okay. Then you can manage it. But if you're just stamping and kicking and being passive aggressive or whatever it is, then we can't really do the work. I call it doing the work sometimes. I think it's,
Mhm.
with people, it says in positions of power who aren't tender. I suppose, yeah, modeling. I model what I expect. If you're there running roughshod over everybody being a bully, I model the behavior I expect. I just think I'm going to try and remain calm and even just speak to them. This is what I expect. And they'll be like, oh, they're a bit shocked. But I think it's, speaking and practicing it and modeling. I hope that's
Thank
answered your
you.
question.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure it has, You spoke of the um when you spoke of not being able to hear if it's not, aggressive. Um I've realized also I was a foster carer for 16 years up until a year ago. Um and something that I recognized as well is like an addiction for the noise and the drama. So when it's too nice and too quiet and too feel too safe or comfortable, just listen out for all hell to start breaking loose. I've seen it in young boys, I've seen it in men, where that is what they're used to. You've been used to drama and noise and disruption, and in its absence, it's like I need something to sink my teeth into. I need something to, and yeah, where is it? Where is it? I don't know if I'm alive anymore, kind
Mm,
of thing, And I feel like I'm saying this to highlight it um, to some of the men that may be present that may not may not have been able to identify this, this dynamic within themselves.
Mm,
So yeah. Um and I say men because it's not likely that too many young boys are tuning in, or little boys from infinite lessons. I wanted to ask what embracing the divine feminine looks like outside of the societal. Again, the glasses round the neck. Outside of the societal aesthetics or ways of viewing. um,
male, female energy.
Leo points to that. I would say I will share a bit of how I perceive the divine feminine. I think that's what it says.
Mhm.
Ask what embracing the divine feminine looks like. Um, and of course, I encourage you to feel into yourself, to feel what the divine feminine within you feels like, looks like, how she behaves within you. But I suppose, firstly, I must speak to what the divine feminine principle feels like to me. And this is whatever I share now will be very limited um, in comparison to the true essence and fullness of what it is. I see the divine feminine characteristics as fluidity, subtlety, dreaminess, wateriness, that which allows emotions to flow, energies to flow, that which is nurturing, the essence of that which is nurturing, that subtlety that we feel when we feel held, nurtured, supported, loved, you know. Um, I see these softer, more subtle aspects of as characteristics and qualities of the divine feminine. Also, as subtle as they are, they're also extremely powerful because they hold the power to support all that is created through them, which is the role of the masculine, the action, the penetrative, the structural, the dense. Um, and therefore, to embrace the divine feminine is to allow these subtleties, the poetics, the melodic or the melodical. Yeah, you get it or not get it. It's soft and it's sweet and it's flowy and it dances around and within the structure. That which is hard, that which is more quantitative is what comes to mind. Hopefully, it makes some sense. And therefore, like I said prior, I encourage you to feel what that feels like within you, even to allow the divine feminine within you um, to give a form, to give you a form of itself, to provide you with a visual of itself. And by all means, to allow the divine masculine within you to give you an image of itself so that it can be made more relatable, so that they can both be made more relatable to you within you, if that makes sense. I had a a teacher. Oh gosh, yeah, this was a good while ago. He was about 93. No, not 93. What am I saying? 87, I think Charles was. And just to give you an example, he said he was an 87-year-old Jewish man, and white Jewish man, because yes, we have black Jewish people. And he said, "Listen, my masculine is a fuck off 6'6" black man with a well hung penis almost touching his." He said, and that was his perception of his divine masculine. So therefore, when I speak to having an image of, um or asking to be given an image, yeah, however that comes to you, it may be created in the form of just a being of light. It may be created in the form, given in the form of an animal, but to allow yourself to witness yourself in your various forms. I hope that helps. And thank you for the question. I just saw that we're past the time, Hakim. So you know, if time is, can
No,
you both speak
I'm
about
good for
how
now.
tenderness? Pardon?
I'm good for a few more minutes. No problem.
Okay. Can you both speak about tenderness? Me and the glasses. About tenderness, about how tenderness can show up in the opposite or shadow side. For example, if someone is a lawyer and fights a case, or if someone plays sports and has the desire to win. Maybe you can deal with this one because someone plays sports and has the desire to win. How can tenderness be integrated in the
Is I'm not
opposite
really
or
sure.
shadow
Are they
side?
asking,
Tenderness.
can you be, can you have a desire to win and still be tender?
Okay. Until be tender. Right. Okay.
That's what I'm reading into it.
Yes, that's what I get too.
I suppose I would.
Absolutely. Allow your tenderness to lead you to the win rather than feeling that you need to fight for it. This calls for surrender, in my experience.
Or
But yes, please go ahead, teacher.
you can win, I suppose, and you said surrender, like yield. So you can still win, I suppose. I'm thinking about maybe there's the word that's coming to mind now is humility, humble. So I can relate it to the young people in the playground when they play a game of sports. They really want to win, and if they lose, they cry. They cry about it. And then those who win, you know, some people might say they're not being really tender because they might mock them or say something like that. But I think you can still have desires. You can still want to achieve your goals and still be tender. I suppose I'm talking as long as you are not putting your foot on the neck or your knee on the neck of someone to reach that desired goal. Because you know you're not extracting pain, you're not extracting the other to achieve that goal. But I think there,
Mm.
the way I kind of incorporate tenderness in my life is just to embody it. So yeah, there are times when I want to achieve something at work, and it might require me working a little bit harder, but I'm still going to be. I don't say harder now, I say smarter. So I'm going to be more tender with myself. I'm still going to be tender with myself, still achieve the goal. I think it's about
Yeah.
the two things can exist at the same time. That's what I'm going to say. You can be tender and still have desires, still have ambitions. You can still be tender. I suppose it's how you manage that process of achieving that goal. Are you exploiting anybody on the way? Are you exploiting yourself along the way? Yeah, that's what I think. What is your intention?
Thank you.
Let's leave that question there.
Thank you. And I see. Um, as you were sharing, I also saw tenderness, incorporating tenderness in the form of acknowledging yourself, acknowledging, which also calls for, again, taking time, slowing down, recognizing that you did this. You just put in 4 hours of reviewing for this case that you know, whatever that you have and you're trying to win, or 4 hours of training, or 5 days of training, acknowledging, bigging up yourself, patting yourself on the back, giving yourself that massage, that rub down after a hard day's work, or even allowing yourself to ask for to ask for what you need to support yourself while you're putting in the work. Allowing yourself to be vulnerable when you get to a point of overwhelm during the training or the preparation, allowing yourself a bath by yourself, allowing yourself permission to go in and not speak to anybody, allowing yourself to ask for what you require to in being supported. Um, so yes, that's how I see it. And yes, I see it as calling for slowing down. And in that slowing down and in that meeting of ourselves, we get to hear inspirations and we get to be inspired into action rather than thinking we need to put in 5 days of training for 3 hours. Whatever the things are that you have thought that you need to put in order to get this result, in truly practicing slowing down. In my experience, you will find that inspirations come more quickly, more clearly, and that action that is fueled by inspiration seems to get quicker results under grace and in more perfect ways. So I suppose that's how I see, those are ways in which I see, being able to incorporate um, tenderness in the opposite side as you asked. Thank you for the question. I'm being reminded okay, yes, I'm being reminded, thank you guys, to mention the offers. There are offers on my website. There it is. I think it may be on the screen. www.seahwraye.com. Please head over there and yeah, see what you like, if anything, and by all means get in touch. It's always an honor and a pleasure. I always forget about these things. So yes, thank you. My wonderful reminders in the background for reminding me. I hope that was sufficient. And I may add something to the comment box as a reminder. Um, yes, I'm not seeing any more questions. So, teacher.
Thank you. Before I move on, I'd like to say that it's what in my practice of tenderness, what I've learned is that we are all connected. We are all connected. There is no separateness. That's what tenderness has taught me, and deep wisdom. We are all connected. And I often, in schools, to show that to young people and adults, I use the journey of the seed of banana, the journey of those, or chocolate, the hands that planted the seeds to the hands that are now. How many hands did it pass through? So yeah, be tender even when you're eating. Just that reminder that we are all connected. We are not You might be individuals, but we're collective. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And you said that, and all right, this happened last week too. I'm in full black. Not often for me.
Mm.
I went to the shower and I was like, all right, what am I putting on? Because I don't know, And I was in the shower and I thought something black, but when I got out, I thought, no. Well, I didn't think no. I just went in to look for something specific. Didn't find what I was looking for. Felt the black thing. And it was just like, this feel right. As we talk about slowing down, tenderness, this is part of this slowing down and the tenderness. So I took what felt right, what I was inspired to put on. And this necklace, which is like, really? Well, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes after you came on the screen, I realized that again, just like last week with my other guest, we are in the same color, even down to the neckline, which seems to reflect very similar colors. This black, gray, white spot. This was not planned, people, not by Hakim in that body, not mentally, not consciously. So connected we are,
Mm-hmm.
never alone, all one. I give thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. To be continued.
Mm-hmm.